You know, the big changes in your life rarely announce themselves. I thought I had it all figured out. Then I found myself in the Nevada desert, making dust angels and crying in front of a stranger. Stick around, because I'm going to tell you how I ended up bartending at sunrise in the middle of nowhere, and what that experience taught me about work, relationships, and letting go. At 25, I had four triple deckers under my belt and more properties being added to the portfolio. I was comfortable, but I couldn't afford to sit on my ass. My days were consumed by work and phone calls. No cell phones back then, just endless stops at the payphone, feeding in quarters like I was playing an old slot machine. Integrity, hard work, focus, and finishing what I started. Those were the values I hung my hat on. But the truth is, I was headed down a dark road. My relationship with my father had messed me up. I had a short fuse, I was judgmental, and road rage was a daily explosion. I ended up having a terrible breakdown. It wasn't pretty, and it's a story for another time. That being said, I learned from a young age that it's important to take a break, to look under the hood every now and then before the engine explodes. Fast forward a decade. My life was busy. Real estate deals, responsibilities, and a marriage. That's how I ended up at Burning Man. I needed time to get into my own head and take a look around. Burning Man, if you've never been, is an annual gathering in Nevada's Black Rock Desert. It isn't a typical festival. It's a temporary city, built by the participants, rooted in radical self-reliance. You bring everything you need, because you can't buy anything there except ice and coffee. Thank God for coffee. I flew into Sausalito with two friends, Lizzie and Tom, veteran burners. We met up with a rented RV and drove deep into the desert, past the point where the world you know disappears. Organized chaos gave way to a living, breathing organism of creativity. As a virgin, my initiation was to make a dust angel in the playa, ringing an old scuba tank bell to announce my arrival. Strangers turned into family. Our camp was called Bojan, no job spelled backward. Out there, titles and bank accounts were meaningless. A CEO looked the same as someone who hadn't held a job in years. I put on goggles and a bandana, hopped on a battered bike, and set out to explore. Imagine a giant mechanical scorpion rolling by, a furry puppy on wheels, driven by a woman in a bikini and a cowboy hat, and a Cadillac convertible perched 6 feet off the ground on caterpillar tracks. People wore tuxedo jackets with board shorts, princess gowns on stilts, golden loincloths, and rhinestone boots. Everyone wore goggles, bandanas, or masks to protect their lungs from the dust. The sculptures were unbelievable. A wooden mammoth skeleton, a giant sandcastle, a half-buried sailing ship. And then there was the temple. 6 months of intricate carving, only to burn in a few hours. Inside, people left photographs, letters, and tokens for loved ones. I wasn't prepared for the emotion. Lynn, my wife, had slipped copies of every poem I'd written for her into my backpack. On the 4th day, at sunset, I tied them to the temple. As I stepped away, a man in fatigues broke a piece of wood. A woman in a black veil asked, "Do you know what you've done?" He cried and fixed it. Nearby, 2 musicians serenaded a naked woman emerging from gauze. She danced like a butterfly, and the man repaired the damage to the rhythm of Nessun Dorma. In that moment, I learned that broken things can be repaired, that mistakes become part of the art. For 5 days, I bartended at the Sunrise Saloon, a bar out on the outer playa with real cocktails, ice, and celery. We woke at 4 a.m., loaded supplies, and watched the sunrise over the desert. Those mornings were magical. One day, we ran out of everything except a single beer. 4 of us shared it, and an opera singer launched into Nessun Dorma. We all cried. Another time, a couple decided to get married at the saloon during our last shift. They panicked when we began dismantling the bar. I told the bride, "We're not taking it apart to end your party. We're taking it apart for safekeeping, so you can celebrate your anniversary next year." She hugged me and called me Reverend. The nickname stuck. The unpredictability of Burning Man is what makes it so special. During a sandstorm, I stumbled into the Hug Deli, where you could order hugs off a menu. I asked for a group hug simply because watching someone else get one made me feel wonderful. We embraced in the blinding dust, then went our separate ways. It was a reminder that sometimes a moment of connection is all it takes to refill your cup. Leaving the playa is like waking up from a dream. On our drive back to Sausalito, we hadn't emptied the RV's septic tanks. 8 hours felt like sitting in hell's latrine. We collapsed at Tom's house, and I booked a taxi for 2 a.m. When I woke up, bleary-eyed, I expected the cab to be long gone, but there it was. A driver with long gray hair and Native American beads. He drove like a NASCAR champion. My old self would have snapped, but I'd just spent a week reflecting on my life. Instead of flipping out, I told him he was a great driver. That opened the floodgates. He told me about almost hitting his son in a moment of rage. I told him about my father and our unresolved fights. In 40 minutes, we connected more deeply than I had with some people I'd known for years. As he helped unload our bags at the airport, he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you worked it out with your father before he died." Tears welled up. "What's your name?" I asked. "James," he said, "but the dispatcher calls me the Reverend." I kept his number. To this day, I don't know if he was a cab driver or some desert mystic sent to deliver a final lesson.